Princess Zilara stood on the balcony of the Grand Palace, overlooking the vast city of her homeworld. The sky was a brilliant shade of purple, and the twin suns were just beginning to set. Zilara couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen, but she wasn't sure what. She was here on a diplomatic mission, sent to negotiate a treaty with the humans. This treaty was crucial for her people, as it would secure their future and ensure peace with the neighboring species. But Zilara's thoughts weren't entirely on the treaty. She kept thinking about Earth, about the humans. Their culture was so different from hers, yet so fascinating. It's their soldiers. There was something about them that intrigued her. Maybe it was their strength, their bravery, or the way they fought for what they believed in. Today, she would meet a human soldier, one of the many assigned to guard her during her stay. His name was Leo, and he was assigned to the palace for the duration of her visit. He was just one of the many soldiers in the human delegation, but something about him felt different. Zilara stood still as she tried to calm her mind. She had to be focused. There was too much at stake for her to let herself get distracted. She had her royal duties to attend to, and this treaty needed to be signed. However, as the day wore on, she couldn't ignore the strange feeling tugging at her. It wasn't just nerves. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her thoughts. She turned to see one of her royal guards standing at attention. "Your Highness?" "The human soldiers are ready for the meeting," the guard said. "The human ambassador is waiting for you in the conference room." Zilara nodded, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her chest. She was the princess. She couldn't let her feelings get in the way of the mission. When she entered the conference room, she was immediately met by the human ambassador and a group of soldiers. Among them was Leo. He stood tall, his posture straight, his eyes sharp and alert. But what caught Zilara off guard was the way he looked at her. There was a recognition in his eyes, something that made her stomach flutter, but she couldn't place it. It was as if he knew her, even though they had never met before. She felt her heart race. She quickly pushed the thought away, reminding herself that she was here on business. Nothing else mattered. The meeting went as expected. Both sides discussed the terms of the treaty, and Zilara found herself mostly focused on the humans and their leader, the ambassador. She spoke politely and listened carefully, her mind wandering only occasionally, mostly when her gaze would unintentionally land on Leo. After the meeting, she was escorted back to her chambers. As she walked down the grand hallway, her thoughts swirled. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that there was something important she had forgotten. She thought back to the look in Leo's eyes. There was no reason for it. She had never met him before, so why did it feel like she knew him? Later that evening, she retired to her quarters. Royal chambers were decorated with beautiful tapestries and soft plush furniture. Zilara sank into the soft chair by the window, staring out into the vast city once again. The twin suns had now set completely, and the stars sparkled brightly above. She closed her eyes and allowed her mind to wander. That's when the memories came flooding back. She was only a child, but she remembered it clearly. She had been lost on a strange planet, far from her home. The planet was not like her own. It was cold, barren, and unfamiliar. She had wandered alone, scared and hungry, until she had stumbled upon a human. A young boy, no older than herself. He had helped her. When she had no one else to turn to, he gave her food, shelter, and comfort in a time of great fear. He had protected her until the rescue team arrived. Zilara had never forgotten him. She had often wondered who he was and where he came from. It all behind her. After all, she was a princess, and there were always important matters to attend to. Still, the memory of that human boy had stayed with her. Now, as she sat in her chambers, the memories felt so vivid, so real. She remembered the way the boy had smiled at her, how kind and selfless he had been. She could almost hear his voice, calling out to her, telling her it would be all right. But there was no way for her to know who he was. She had only been a child, and the boy was just a stranger. But then the thought crossed her mind again. Could it be him? The soldier standing in front of her earlier that day be the same boy who had saved her life all those years? ago. It was a ridiculous thought. She hadn't seen him in so long. How could she possibly recognize him now, especially after so many years had passed? But the more Zilara thought about it, the more she realized that there was something familiar about him. It wasn't just the way he looked at her, it was his eyes. They were the same. There was something in them that she had seen before, and she was just a little girl, lost and alone on a strange world. She shook her head, trying to make sense of it. It couldn't be him, she thought. It's impossible. But the doubt lingered. And the more she thought about it, the harder it became to ignore. The man she had once called a hero, the boy who had saved her life, could he be right here in front of her? And if so, what did it mean? Zilara didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. Everything was about to change. She had met Leo for a reason, and somehow their paths were destined to cross once again. The next day, Zilara couldn't focus. She tried to keep her mind on the treaty and her royal duties, but all she could think about was Leo, the feeling that she knew him. There was something about him that tugged at her heart, wouldn't leave her. She stood on the balcony of her chambers again, staring out at the busy city below. People were going about their day, but she felt disconnected from it all. The grand palace, the negotiations, the endless demands of being a princess, it all felt distant. All that mattered to her now was the question that kept circling in her mind. Could Leo really be the boy who saved me all those years ago? The more she thought about it, the more the memories flooded back. She had been so young, only a child, lost on a foreign world. She could still remember the cold, the hunger, the feeling of being completely alone. She had wandered for what felt like days, exhausted and scared. Until she found him. He was just a boy, not much older than she was at the time. I had looked at her with such kindness, as though helping her was the most natural thing in the world. She remembered how he had given her food, shared his warmth, and even comforted her with soft words. She had never forgotten the way his eyes had looked at her, filled with warmth and understanding. Even though they had only known each other for a brief moment, Zilara remembered how he had smiled when she asked him why he was helping her. He had simply replied, "Because everyone deserves a chance, even if they're lost." That had stuck with her all these years. But now, as she thought about Leo, she began to see the same kindness in his eyes. His smile was familiar, like something she had seen before, long ago. But that didn't make sense. How could it be the same boy? She had been a child, and now Leo was a grown man. He was a soldier, a protector of the peace. The man she had once known was gone, replaced by a new identity. Still, Zilara couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. She had to know the truth. She had to find out if Leo really was the boy who had once saved her life. Later that day, after a long meeting with the human ambassadors, Zilara found herself walking through the palace gardens, lost in thought. Air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, and the soft chirping of alien birds filled the quiet afternoon. As she walked, her mind wandered back to that day so many years ago. She could almost hear the boy's voice again, like a whisper in the wind. She stopped beside a large stone fountain, staring at the water as it rippled gently. The sight brought a sense of calm, but it didn't ease the questions in her heart. She needed to find Leo and talk to him, to ask him the questions that had been haunting her since their first meeting. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Leo standing a few paces away, his posture straight and respectful. He was still in his soldier's uniform, but there was something softer about him now, as if he had dropped the tough exterior for a moment. He looked at her, his expression serious but kind. "Your Highness," Leo said, bowing slightly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Zilara felt her heart skip a beat. There he was, the man who had been on her mind for so long. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected to see him here, but somehow it felt right. "No, you're not disturbing me," she replied, her voice steady though. Her mind was racing. "I was just ... thinking." Leo stepped closer, his eyes searching her face, as though he was trying to understand something that he, too, felt but couldn't explain. Zilara couldn't help but notice how much older he looked now, the boyish innocence she had remembered, replaced by the maturity of a seasoned soldier. But there was still something about him that felt familiar, Something in the way he carried himself. You seem troubled, Leo said softly. Is everything all right, princess? Zilara hesitated for a moment, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. She wanted to ask him everything, to demand answers, but she didn't know where to start. It was as if speaking the words would shatter the delicate connection that had been building between them. I don't know, Zilara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about something. Something that happened when I was a child. It's silly, but I feel like I've met you before. Leo's brow furrowed slightly, his expression serious. What do you mean? Zilara took a deep breath, steadying herself. When I was young, I was lost on a foreign planet. I don't remember much, but there was a boy who helped me, gave me food, shelter, and comfort. Until my people found me, I've never forgotten him. His kindness, his eyes. They're etched in my mind. Leo didn't say anything for a moment, simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Zalara's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for his response. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Leo spoke. I think I know what you're talking about, he said quietly. I remember a mission many years ago. There was a girl who was lost, stranded on a strange world. I helped her, just as you said. I never knew who she was, but I remember her eyes. Zylara's breath caught in her throat. That was you? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Leo nodded, his gaze unwavering. I never forgot you either. The world seemed to stop around them. In that moment, everything fell into place. But Leo, the boy who had saved her life all those years ago, was standing before her as a man. The memories of her childhood had come flooding back. The man she had once known was here now, in front of her, in a way she never expected. Zilara felt a strange mixture of emotions, surprise, relief, confusion, but most of all, a sense of connection, one that spanned years and worlds, and it was stronger than anything she had ever imagined. Zylara's heart raced as she looked at Leo. The world around them felt far away, as if the gardens, the palace, and everything else had disappeared. It was just the two of them, standing in this quiet moment of understanding. The boy who had once saved her life had now become a man, standing before her as if time itself had brought them together again. Leo stood still, watching Zilara carefully. He seemed as lost in the moment as she was, unsure of how to proceed. The silence between them felt heavy, filled with 1,000 unspoken words. Zylara's mind raced, trying to understand the situation. She had spent years wondering about the boy who had helped her, and now to realize that he was right here, in front of her, was overwhelming. I can't believe it, Zilara whispered, still trying to wrap her mind around the truth. You're the same boy, the one who helped me. Leo nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and something deeper. I never knew who you were, he said quietly. I only remember helping a girl, a lost traveler. I didn't know her name. I didn't know she was a princess. Zilara took a deep breath. I don't think I knew who I was either. Not in that moment. I was just a scared child, far from home. You were the only one who helped me. Her voice faltered for a moment, and Leo's gaze softened. He stepped a little closer, his presence comforting, as though he could sense the confusion and the flood of emotions Zilara was trying to hold back. I've never forgotten you, Leo, Zilara said, looking into his eyes, searching for some kind of answer. I've thought about you so many times over the years, and yet I never imagined I would see you again. It's not like this. Leo's expression remained steady, though he was clearly grappling with the same questions. I never expected this either. The galaxy is so vast, and yet we cross paths again. I've seen many faces, many worlds, but none like yours. You've stayed with me in a way no one else has. Zilara felt her heart stir at his words. There was no denying the bond they shared. It was more than just fate. It was something deeper, something that felt almost destined. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his arm. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. I don't know what this means, Leo, Zilara confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not children anymore. I'm a princess, and you're a soldier. Our worlds are different now." Leo didn't pull away. Instead, he met her gaze with a quiet strength, as though he understood her concerns more than anyone else could. "I know I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to forget who you are or what your duties are. I only want you to know that I'm here. I will always be here if you need me." Zillara was silent for a moment, trying to process the weight of his words. She had never expected this meeting to go like this. She had thought of Leo only as a distant memory, a story from her childhood. But now, here he was, standing beside her, and she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. I don't know what to do with this," Zillara admitted, her voice shaky. "I never imagined I would see you again, let alone ... this. I have responsibilities. Leo, my people, my kingdom, they all depend on me. And yet here you are, and everything is different now." Leo nodded, understanding her confusion. "Why?" "Get it. You have a duty. But I'm not here to complicate your life. I just ... I needed you to know that I remember you. I didn't forget, not for a moment." Zillara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had spent so many years wondering about Leo, wondering what had happened to the kind boy who had helped her. And now, here he was, as real and present as the stars above them. She didn't know what this meeting meant, or what would happen next, but she couldn't deny the connection they shared. "I wish I had more time," Zillara said softly. "But I have to meet with the human delegation later today. There's still so much to do." Leo's expression was gentle, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "I understand. But know this, Zillara. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. You're doing great things for your people, and I'll always be here, even if you don't need me." Zillara nodded, feeling both comforted and conflicted. She didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell him how much she appreciated his words, how much she valued their time together. She also knew that they both had their own paths to follow. The galaxy was far too complicated for things to be simple. For a moment, they just stood there in silence, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Then, Zillara straightened her back, pushing aside the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her voice steady once more. "Thank you for reminding me of who I am and for being here. I won't forget this." Leo smiled, a soft, knowing smile that warmed her heart. "I won't forget you either." With that, they parted ways. Zillara walked back to the palace, her thoughts a whirlwind. Everything had changed. She wasn't the same person she had been when she arrived here. And neither was Leo. They had shared a moment, a powerful revelation. But now they both had their duties to attend to. Zillara knew that their paths might not cross again for a long time, but she also knew that their connection would never fade. No matter what the future held, she would always remember the boy who had saved her, and the man he had become. The days after the revelation passed quickly, but Zillara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between her and Leo. She had tried to focus on her duties attending meetings, discussing the terms of the treaty with the human ambassadors, and addressing the concerns of her people, but her mind kept wandering back to him, the soldier,
The boy
who had once saved her life. It was hard to ignore the pull she felt whenever she saw him. Leo wasn't just any soldier. He was the one who had been there for her when she was a scared child, lost and alone. But things were different now. She was a princess, and he was a soldier, not just a boy from her past. They came from different worlds, and their roles were clear. Her people depended on her, and Leo had his own duty to the humans. The palace was busy with preparations for the final treaty meeting, and Zillara found herself lost in thought once again. She stood on the balcony of her chambers, looking out at the bright stars above. The night air was cool, and the distant hum of the city echoed in the silence. She didn't want to admit it, but she felt torn between her responsibilities and the connection she felt to Leo. Her heart told her one thing, but her mind told her another. As the future ruler of her people, she couldn't afford to let personal feelings interfere with her duties. She had to be strong. She had to lead. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find one of her royal advisors. A tall alien with sharp features and a serious expression. "Princess," the advisor said, bowing slightly. "The humans are ready for the final negotiations. We're expecting you in the council hall." Zilara nodded and turned away from the balcony, taking one last look at the stars before heading toward the council hall. Knew that this moment would define her people's future, and she couldn't let anything distract her. Not even Leo. When she entered the hall, she was greeted by the human ambassadors and their soldiers, including Leo. His gaze met hers instantly, and for a brief moment, she felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. She quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was no time for personal emotions. This was about securing peace for her world. The negotiation went on as expected, but Zilara couldn't help but notice the tension in the room. The humans were asking for more favorable terms, and the alien representatives were pushing back. The conversation became heated, with voices raised and disagreements on nearly every point. Zilara felt the weight of her responsibility more than ever. She had to make a decision, and the wrong one could cost her people everything. The pressure was mounting, and she could feel her resolve beginning to slip. She glanced around the room, trying to focus, when her eyes landed on Leo. He was standing at the back of the room, his posture straight and his eyes watchful, but there was something different about his expression. It wasn't just the soldier anymore, it was the man she had spoken to. It's the man who had once been her hero. His gaze softened as their eyes met, and for a moment, Zalara's thoughts clouded. She knew he wasn't just a soldier to her. She knew. She had feelings for him, but what could they do with those feelings? Could they allow themselves to be more than what their worlds expected? But just as quickly as the thought entered her mind, she pushed it away. She had no time for distractions. A treaty needed to be signed. She couldn't afford to be distracted by her emotions. Zilara stood up, her posture straightening as she addressed the room. "Enough," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We will not continue like this. We are here to find peace, not to argue. Let us return to the terms and find a way to compromise." The room fell silent. Zilara felt the weight of all eyes on her as she took charge of the situation. She had been trained for this. She knew how to lead. She wasn't going to let anything derail her people's future, not even the strange pull she felt toward Leo. The rest of the meeting was tense, but Zilara remained calm. She negotiated the terms, working tirelessly to ensure that both sides would walk away with something. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was the only way to ensure lasting peace. She could feel the exhaustion setting in, but she couldn't show it. Not now. Finally, after hours of discussion, the treaty was signed. Both sides agreed to the terms, and the room erupted in a mixture of relief and quiet celebration. Zilara felt a sense of accomplishment, but it was tempered by the heavy feeling in her chest. She had done it. The treaty was in place, and her people were safe. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As the meeting adjourned, Zilara walked toward the exit, her thoughts still swirling. Leo had done his part, standing in the background and offering silent support. But she hadn't been able to focus on him, not fully. She needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. The treaty was just the beginning, but the path ahead would not be easy. She stepped into the hallway, and there he was waiting for her, just outside the door. His presence was like a magnet, pulling her in. Zilara stopped, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't expected to see him here. "Zilara," Leo said softly, his voice calm, but filled with something else, something unspoken. "You did well today. Your people are lucky to have you." Zilara looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what he meant, but there was so much more behind his words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy with the unspoken feelings between them, a tension that neither of them knew how to resolve. Finally, Leo took a step closer. "I don't know what the future holds for us, Zilara, but I do know one thing. I'll always be here if you need me." Zilara's heart fluttered in her chest, but she didn't know how to respond. All she could do was nod. Knowing that the future was uncertain for both of them, she wasn't sure what would come next, but one thing was Clear her connection to Leo was not something she could ignore. Not anymore. The days following the treaty signing were filled with excitement and tension. For the first time in years, the possibility of peace between the humans and Xylaris people felt real. She had worked hard to ensure the terms were fair and just. For both sides, the treaty would secure their futures, prevent war, and open the door to new alliances. Yet, despite the success, Xylara couldn't ignore the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. Something was off. Xylara sat in her chambers late one evening, her thoughts racing. The celebrations had ended, and she had finally allowed herself to rest. But her mind wouldn't stop. She couldn't shake the thought that something important was being hidden from her. She couldn't explain it. But she had this nagging feeling that the peace they had just negotiated wasn't as secure as it seemed.
Ow.
The humans were happy with the treaty, but there was a part of her that questioned whether they were hiding their true intentions. Was there a secret agenda? Was there something more to their visit than what they had told her? Xylara stood up from her desk and walked over to the large window. The night outside was calm, the stars shining brightly above the city. The palace was quiet, almost too quiet. She was about to turn away when she noticed a figure moving in the distance, someone in a dark cloak. Moving quickly through the shadows, her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to seeing figures like that in the palace grounds. The royal guards usually kept the area secure. Who was that person? Before she could make up her mind, the figure disappeared into the darkness. Xylara felt a sudden chill run through her. She had to find out what was going on. There was no time to waste. Without hesitation, she grabbed her cloak and hurried out of her chambers. She moved quickly through the quiet hallways, her footsteps barely making a sound. As she reached the palace courtyard, she saw the cloaked figure again, this time near the outer walls of the palace. Xylara moved closer, staying hidden in the shadows. She had to know who this person was and why they were here. She crept forward, her heart pounding in her chest, until she was close enough to hear muffled voices. "Everything is in place," a voice whispered. "The princess doesn't suspect." A thing, Xylara froze. The voice was familiar, but she couldn't place it. The words made her blood run cold. The princess doesn't suspect a thing. What were they talking about? What did they mean? She took a step forward, but a twig snapped. Underfoot. The figure turned sharply, their eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Xylara's heart raced as she stood frozen in place. The figure didn't say a word. Instead, they turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing. Before Xylara could react, her mind was spinning. She couldn't believe what she had just overheard. Someone was planning something against her. But who? And why? Xylara quickly returned to her chambers, her thoughts racing. She couldn't let this go. She had to find out who was behind the plot. The treaty had barely been signed, and already there were forces working against her. Was it the humans? It's someone within her own court? She knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help. The next day, Xylara summoned Leo to her chambers. He had been quiet after the treaty was signed, his presence steady but distant. She hadn't seen him much since the meeting, and she knew it was time to tell him everything. When Leo entered her chambers, his expression was calm, but Xylara could see the concern in his eyes. He had always been good at reading people, and he could tell that something was wrong. "You called for me, Your Highness?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Xylara didn't waste time with pleasantries. She told him about the figure she had seen in the courtyard the night before, about the conversation she had overheard, and about her growing suspicion that something was wrong. "I can't shake the feeling that someone is plotting against me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that lurked beneath. "The treaty is important, but I think there's something more going on here. I need your help, Leo. I can't trust anyone else right now." Leo listened quietly, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. After a long pause, he spoke. "I'll help you, Princess," he said, his voice full of determination. "We'll find out who's behind this, and we'll stop them together." Xylara felt a rush of relief wash over her. She knew she had made the right choice. Leo was someone she could trust. He had always been there for her, even when they were children. And now, as adults, they would face whatever threat was looming over them. "I'm glad you're here," Zalara said softly. "I don't know who to trust anymore, but I trust you." Leo nodded, his gaze steady. "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." That evening, Leo and Zalara began their investigation. They moved through the palace, in the dead of night, searching for any clues that might lead them to the person responsible for the plot. They spoke to the palace guards, asking discreet questions and looking for any signs of unusual activity. It wasn't long before they discovered something. One of the guards, a young man who had been stationed near the outer walls, seemed to be acting strangely. When Leo questioned him, the guard became defensive and evasive, giving short, unconvincing answers. Zalara exchanged a look with Leo. This was it. They had found their first lead. "We'll follow him," Leo said quietly, his voice full of resolve. "We'll find out what he's hiding." As they followed the guard through the winding corridors of the palace, Zalara couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Someone was trying to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. But with Leo by her side, she felt a sense of hope. They would face this threat together, and no matter what happened, she wouldn't let anyone take away the peace she had fought for. The following night, Zalara and Leo continued their search. The guard they had been watching had led them into a part of the palace that Zalara had never seen before. It was a narrow, dimly lit hallway that seemed to go on forever. The air was thick with dust, and the stone walls felt colder here, as though the palace itself was trying to hide something. They kept their distance, moving silently in the shadows. Zalara's heart raced as they followed the guard, trying not to make a sound. They couldn't risk being seen. If they were discovered, the whole plan could fall apart. The guard they were following seemed unaware of their presence. His steps hurried as he approached an unmarked door at the end of the hall. "Do you think he knows we're following him?" Zalara whispered, her voice barely audible. Leo glanced at her, his face calm but focused. "He's not acting like someone who knows he's being watched. But we have to be careful. There could be others." Zalara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. Who was this guard, and why was he sneaking around the palace at night? She had a bad feeling about this, but she couldn't let fear take over. She had to stay focused. The guard finally reached the door and knocked softly. After a moment, it opened just enough to let him slip inside. Zalara and Leo exchanged a quick look before moving forward, careful to keep their footsteps as quiet as possible. They reached the door and pressed their ears against it, trying to hear what was going on inside. The voices were muffled, but Zalara could make out a few words. "We need to move quickly," one voice said. "The princess is too close to uncovering everything." Zalara's heart skipped a beat. "We're talking about her. Once the final phase is in place, we can proceed with the plan," another voice replied. "The humans will be pleased. The princess will never see it coming." Zalara's breath caught in her throat. What plan? What were they talking about? What was about to happen? She and Leo exchanged a glance, both of them silent for a moment as the weight of the situation settled over them. They had to act fast. Leo turned to her, his voice low. "We can't go in there without knowing what's happening. We need more information. Wait here. I'll circle around and try to find another way in." Zalara nodded, watching as Leo slipped away into the shadows. She waited, her nerves on edge, hoping he would return soon with the answers they needed. Minutes felt like hours as Zalara stood alone in the dark corridor. Her mind raced with the implications of what she had overheard. Who were these people? Were they working for the humans? For someone else? The thought of betrayal twisted in her stomach. Finally, Leo returned, his face tense. "I found another way in," he said quietly. "We'll need to move quickly. There's a hidden chamber just beyond this door, and I think it's where they're planning something big." Zalara's heart raced as they prepared to enter. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than they had. Imagine this wasn't just a simple conspiracy, it was something far more dangerous. And she had to stop it before it was too late. Leo gently pushed open the door, and they slipped inside. The chamber was small and dimly lit, with strange, unfamiliar symbols carved into the walls. A long table was in the center of the room, and several figures were gathered around it. Speaking in hushed tones, Zillara held her breath as she and Leo hid behind a large stone pillar, trying to stay out of sight. The figures at the table were too busy to notice them. Zillara could hear fragments of their conversation. Double quotes. ... The princess will be out of the way soon. One figure said, his voice cold and calculating. Once we take control of the palace, the humans will have no choice but to align with us. The galaxy will be ours. Zilara's heart sank. Take control of the palace? They were planning a coup. This is it, another figure said. Look. Take the princess out of the picture. It'll be easy. She's already been distracted with the humans. Now, we just need to put our plan into motion. Zillara clenched her fists, her mind spinning. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. They were planning to kill her and take over the palace. But who were they working for? And why were they targeting her? Leo's eyes met hers, and he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. They needed to leave before they were discovered. Slowly, they began to back away, their footsteps silent against the cold stone floor. As they reached the door, Zilara's mind was racing. She had to warn her people, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed Leo and his soldiers. She needed to act quickly before it was too late. They stepped back into the hallway and closed the door softly behind them. Zilara's mind was filled with the faces of the conspirators. They had to be stopped, and she would be the one to do it. Leo turned to her, his face grim. We need to warn the others now. Zillara nodded. We can't waste any more time. The palace is in danger.
What?
Without another word, they set off down the hall, moving quickly toward the heart of the palace. They had to find a way to stop the plot before it could destroy everything they had worked for. The treaty was supposed to bring peace, but now it seemed like peace was the last thing on anyone's mind as they moved through the palace. Zilara's thoughts kept returning to the human soldiers, to Leo. He had been there for her once before. And now, as they faced this danger together, Zillara knew she wasn't alone. She had allies. She had Leo. And together, they would stop the people who threatened her world.